Lesson 4, Part 1. In this lesson, we are going to continue following the Golden Dawn initiatic pattern by moving from the study of the magical element of earth to the study of the magical element of air. You should start with the exercises below as soon as possible. If after working with the exercises for earth in the previous lesson you are not satisfied with your understanding of the feeling of unity with the element earth, continue with those exercises for up to 2 more weeks. Then do them sporadically as you will. However, you should begin the exercises below immediately. The element of air has the qualities of being warm and moist. The following exercises will help you to becoming more aware of the element in your daily life. Exercise 1. Observe those things around you which have the combined qualities of warmth and moistness. Remember, all of these elemental qualities are relative. Steam is a form of the element air, and it is as much more moist and warmth than does the vapor from dry ice. However, that cold vapor from the dry ice also has the element of air within it. See if you can determine the relative airy qualities as you experience them. Make a list of all things and record it in your diary. Do this exercise daily for 1 week. Exercise 2. Find a spot where you can be alone. Take with you an outdoor reclining lounger, the type that has nylon webbing around an aluminum frame. If you don't have one of those, a folding chair will suffice. The idea here is to be elevated above the ground and have as much of the physical air surrounding your body as possible. Remove all of your clothing and lie on the lounger or sit in the chair. If you cannot find a place where this is possible, wear as little clothing as you can. For men, a brief men's swimming suit is fine. For women, a tiny bikini will do. The object here is not nudity, but rather to allow as much air to touch the body as possible. What will you be doing is known as elemental pore breathing. To do this, start off by doing the relaxation ritual. Next, become very aware of your breath. Become aware of the slow in and out motion of the physical air. Notice the way the air feels as it comes in through the nose, goes down the air pipe and into the lungs. Sense or imagine the interchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide within the lungs, and feel the CO2's laden air as it goes out of the lungs, through the air pipe and out of the nose and mouth. Now imagine that your entire body is nothing but a large breathing apparatus. Imagine that every part of your body has only the function of breathing. Further, visualize that your skin is part of this system. As you physically breathe, imagine that every pore of your skin is also breathing. However, just as your legs breathe in physical air, your pores should be breathing in elemental air. Feel it going in and out of you, cleansing and purifying your entire body. Try this exercise at different times of the day and, if possible, at different locations. Air is the second most changeable of the elements, and you can experience it in many different ways. Do this exercise daily for at least a week. If you wish, you may do it for a longer period of time, but after a week, go on to the next exercise. Exercise 3. Spend a period of up to 3 minutes, no more, once a day, imagining that you are the element air. Feel the lightness, the floating giddiness, the warmth and moistness of air. Feel how physical things don't seem to matter, and learn the true meaning of the term airhead. This is not said in jest, but in all seriousness. Become air. Do this exercise for a week only, no more. Do not repeat it. If repeated, it is your desire, for at least a month. Do not repeat it for more often than 1 week or out of a month. This is no more than 12 weeks per year, 1 week at a time. If you notice that you are having trouble finishing your normal work, halt this exercise immediately. In a day or 2, you will be back to normal. Also, doing exercise 3 from the section of the element of earth from the previous lesson will help overcome problems of absorbing too much air, which is the cause of becoming an airhead. Exercise 4. Once you have learned how to be an airhead without allowing it to take over your life, the next step is to take greater conscious control of the element air. Take a moment and imagine yourself to be air. Bring the feeling from the last exercise into your consciousness. Next, hold your hands 9 to 12 inches apart, palms facing each other. Imagine a bottle or box between your hands. Now, as you exhale, visualize all of the air element which is in you going out with your breath and being trapped in the container between your hands. 3 to 5 breaths should be enough to feel it. Then, with 3 breaths, inhale it back into yourself and go back to normal consciousness. The test. This test will allow you to see whether or not you are ready to become not only in harmony with the magical element of air, but also to see if you are able to control the element. The next time you feel heavy, bloated, slow, or lazy from the container of air as described in the previous exercise, once the container of air has been formed with one big inhalation, draw the contents of the container back into you. Within 5 minutes, you should feel relaxed and refreshed, lighter and anxious to do those tasks you wish to do. The next time that you feel lightheaded, giddy, overly silly, unstable, etc., again form the container of air. Next, visualize a large black hole in the physical air in front of you. When your container is filled to overwhelming with your excess element air, throw the container into the black hole. That is, visualize yourself tossing the container of element air into the black hole, and then see the hole sealing up after your container has entered it. You should feel more grounded and balanced in a few minutes, but it may be necessary to repeat this black holing experiment 2 or 3 times to feel totally normal. When you have passed both parts of this test to your satisfaction, you will have mastered the element of air. As I said about element earth, if you do not succeed at such mastery within a few days or weeks, don't worry about it. Just keep practicing. With one or more of the magical elements, it may take only a few hours, days, or weeks to master. Other elements may take longer. But remember, there is no race to succeed. And do not give up. Just keep practicing without worrying about the results. Eventually, you will succeed, as have all who have diligently practiced. Record the results of your experiments, good, bad, and indifferent, in your magical diary. Part 2. As I said before, anyone can do a ritual, but the ceremony really takes a group to perform properly. Let's assume that you have gathered a group of people together and all of you are studying via this course. There then is a group ritual, a healing ceremony. This is a ceremony to help someone who needs to be healed. There should be a minimum of 3 people plus the person to be healed. This particular ceremony should not be used on someone who has a fever, nor should it be used on someone who has a minor cold or flu, as those are needed to cleanse the body of toxins due to poor living habits. However, when most of the cold or flu is over and the ill person is just very tired from the effects of this illness, this ceremony is effective. It is also good for chronic diseases. The only exception to the above rules is if the cold or flu is life-threatening. This ceremony will not replace the treatment of a regular physical, an MD, but an MD may need to change a treatment when a patient is found to be better or totally healed. Step 1. Have the person in your group who is most adept at doing a divination, such as with the tarot, do one to see if it is appropriate to do the healing. If not, do not do the healing, trust the divination. Step 2. If the answer from the divination is positive, ask the ill person if he or she freely gives permission for the group to do this healing ceremony. If the answer is no, do not go further. Even if the person has previously begged for a healing, the question should be asked. If the answer is positive, prepare the area as follows. A. Form a ring of chairs with even room allowed to walk around outside the circle of chairs. There may be more chairs than people. B. In the center should be the altar with the usual paraphernalia upon it. Another chair for the person being healed should be stationed in front of the altar, facing east. The ill person should sit in it throughout the ceremony, especially if that person is not part of your participating group. Others should sit in a circle of chairs as they will. Step 3. A person should be chosen to lead the relaxation ritual. Let that person use a low, deep, relaxing voice, almost as if trying to get a small child to fall asleep. Step 4. Let one person do the LBRP. The Kabbalistic cross should be done from behind the altar facing east. The formulation of the pentagram should be done by walking outside the circle of chairs so that all are enclosed. The evocation of the archangels and the repetition of the Kabbalistic cross should be done facing east, from behind the altar, assuming you have one, if not, from behind the person to be healed. It is also possible to have one person do the Kabbalistic cross, another do the formulation of the pentagrams, and another do the evocation of the archangels, and the first person repeat the Kabbalistic cross. Personally, I have found this to be as effective as having one person do the entire LBRP, but try both ways and see which you prefer. The person being healed should not be actively involved in performing the LBRP. Also, all of the members of the circle should be focusing on the ritual being performed, and should add their own visualizations to those of the persons doing the ritual. No one, save the person to be healed, should ever be doing nothing within the circle once the ceremony starts. Step 5. Let all the ritualists, save one, come forward and form a circle, holding hands around the person to be healed. In this position, let all do the middle pillar ritual. The one remaining ritualist should stand in the east facing west toward the people also doing the middle pillar ritual, but should imagine himself or herself as being 100 feet tall and both watching and partaking of this ritual. Step 6. The person in the east should hold in the right hand either a dagger for chronic or mild problems, or the wand for more severe problems. When the middle pillar ritual is complete, this person should hold up his or her arm as if in blessing, and walk directly toward the circle of bodies, saying, I come in the power of light. I come in the power of wisdom. I come in the mercy of the light. The light hath healing in its wings. Step 7. By this time, he or she should be next to the circle of people with the tool. He or she should point either toward the top of the ill person's head or toward particularly the part of the body wherein lies the problem to be healed. At this instant, all in the circle should imagine a giant bright light above the center of the circle. This is a group keter rather than an individual keter. Each ritualist should see a beam of light shoot out toward the space of the person with the tool. When the lone ritualist feels this as being accomplished, he or she should direct this huge amount of combined group and spiritual energy down to the tool and into the body of the person being healed. Step 8. When the ritualist senses that the person under the magical tool has the energy running clearly through him or her, the ritualist should start vibrating at a very low pitch, the vowel sound ah. All save the person being healed should join in with the intonation of the vowel, letting it rise in pitch and volume. When the ritualists feel it can get no higher, he or she should say now as a cue for all the ritualists to shout gla, thus making gla or gla as in the LBRP, and clap their hands loudly, thus breaking the circle of energy. Immediately the ritualist turns east, raises both hands, still holding the tool in the right hand, and says, Not unto me, but unto thee be the power and the glory forever. All ritualists vibrate Amen and return to their seats. Step 9. The LBRP is repeated as before. Here ends the healing ceremony. Another purpose of the sudden break of the circle with claps and a shout is to prevent any of the energy from going back into the ritualist. Although it would not hurt them since it is positive, it would lower the power of the healing. It also prevents a negative backlash, which is frequency suffered by healers who are naturally talented but have no magical experience or knowledge. Sometimes this type of healer ends up temporarily suffering from the same symptoms as the person being healed. This negative backlash is totally avoided by the technique of the above ceremony. Some of you may be wondering about my associations from wand and dagger. I will have more to say about this later in this lesson. Part 3. In this section, I will be sharing some ideas on symbolism with you, starting with one of the oldest and best known symbols, the cross. The cross is far older than Christianity. It has always been revered as a spiritual and religious symbol. This is why early Christians usurped the cross as their symbol. Various non-Christian traditionalists had used forms of the cross far back into antiquity. By using the cross as their new symbol, it was taught that it would be easier to convince the pagans that they should worship a similar god, one who had the same symbol. In a similar fashion, pagan holy places were usurped by Christians and changed into churches. Thus, if a pagan wished to worship at a sacred site, he or she would have to go into the church and worship there. The earliest Christians used the symbol of a fish drawn with one continuous loop or line. See figure P140. To represent this faith, some Christians say that this is because Jesus was said to be a fisherman, although nowhere in the New Testament does it show him fishing. Also, it is said to represent Christianity because the Greek word for fish, ichthys, is an acronym, or notoricon, for the Greek words meaning Jesus Christ, Son of God, the Savior. On an astrological basis, Jesus wasn't a fisherman, but a fishman. That is an archetype of the Piscean age. There are many dates given for the beginning of the age of Pisces. The astrological sign is represented by two fish, but they all center around the start of the Common Era within a few hundred years of the year 1 AD. Great charismatic leaders with large followings of sometimes mindless devotees are typical of the Piscean age. Thus, from the beginning of this age, we have had Alexander the Great, Jesus, Cromwell, some of the popes, Arthur of England, Mussolini, Hitler, Roosevelt, Kennedy, Marx, Stalin, Mao, Falwell, Rev, Moon, Jim Jones, Parapaduta, Gandhi, and many others. I am not trying to equate the qualities of goodness or badness between these men, only to indicate that their charisma and ability to attract sometimes mindless followings, nor should I have left out the women such as Joan of Arc, Blavatsky, Besant, McPherson, Anthony, Sangar, Perrin, and others. These women too attracted and still attract many followers. Jesus as a Piscean age archetype is perfectly represented by the symbol of the fish. One of the earliest forms of the cross was known in ancient Egypt times. It had a loop at the top and was still known as the crux, female, male, the ankh. Ansata, the looped cross, Isis, sandal-strapped, and the ankh. Many people following a spiritual path try to ignore the inherent sexuality of the ankh. The vertical bar representing the erect male organ, while the loop and the split horizontal bar represents the female sexual organ. Together indicating sexual intercourse, they are a symbol of fertility. With this understanding, it is easy to see how the ankh has evolved into a symbol of life, eternal life, reincarnation, and rebirth. Why should the sandal strap of Isis represent eternal life, as some have claimed? Why, as one group maintains, with the shadows of a person with his or her arms outstretched, which looks like an ankh, represent life after life. This cross is a pre-Christian and non-Christian symbol. Curiously, the ankh is used by Roman Catholics. In their robes, and some church officials wear two ankhs, one on the front and one on the back with a common loop. When wearing this outfit, the loop is placed over the head, which gives rise to speculation over sexual symbology and spirituality. In any event, the looped cross is not a Christian symbol. Solar cross, Celtic cross. The ancient pagan Europeans also had crosses. One type of cross which was popular was the equal-armed or solar cross. Another was the circle or Celtic cross. Remember, Celtic is pronounced Celtic and not Celtic. The mystical swastika, the perverse Nazi swastika. Another form of the cross which appeared all over Europe and parts of North America was the spinning solar cross, also known as the Philfoot cross, the hammer of Thor, or the swastika. This holy and mystical symbol was also drawn in a horizontal vertical pattern with the arms in such a way that the cross appeared to be moving with the sun or clockwise. It is a shame that this symbol was perverted by the black magic lodges of Germany, of which Hitler was a member. In the diagram above, you can see how the Nazi swastika goes against the sun, giving the impression of spinning in a counterclockwise direction. Note, too, that it is on a point rather than a horizontal vertical. Although the Nazis did at times use the true mystical swastika, their official symbol was the perverted version. Today, most people are disgusted with the symbol and do not separate the spiritual from the obscene. The purpose of the above paragraphs, besides looking at symbology, is to firmly implant in your mind that the rituals we do, even though in places they do involve the symbolisms of the cross, are not Christian, Nazi, or in other faiths or dogma, nor are they merely de-Christianized versions of Christian symbol and ritual. If anything, it would be more correct to say that Christianity has borrowed the ancient mystical symbols for its own purposes. Thus, if you are Jewish, Hindu, Muslim, pagan, agnostic, or something else, there should be nothing to hinder you from using the holy symbol of the cross, as in the Celtic Tarot reading of the Kabbalistic cross section of the LBRP, and other rituals as well. The way we use a cross is not Christian, or perhaps could say that it is beyond Christian. Also, symbols currently used by other traditions can be used by those from Christian backgrounds without insult, as they come from our universal mystical source, not a sectarian one. Another symbol is composed of the letters INRI. The most famous use of these letters was supposedly on Jesus' cross. They were an abbreviation, again a notaricon. There are many of these in both the Old and New Testament for Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. During the Dark Ages and into the Renaissance, if you did not want to be tortured and burned by the powers of the church, it was a wise idea to hide mystical and political ideas within Christian symbolism. Thus, other meanings of the letters INRI developed. To alchemists, it stood for Igni Naturae Removate Intagere, Latin for nature by fire is renewed in its integrity. In a later lesson, I will be discussing certain aspects of alchemy which will make this particular phrase instantly clear and of great magical import. Another version of this letters, which was also important to the medieval alchemists, was Igni Nitrum Ravis Invenitum. Again, this was Latin. Then the language of the learned, and meant shining or glittering is rarely found in fire. This may be a bit more difficult to comprehend, but once a certain aspect of alchemy is explained, it should become very clear. Believe it or not, there are many people today who consider Jesuit order to be a danger to our way of life. Personally, I don't agree with that thought, even they do follow a leader known as the Black Pope. He is called this not for spiritual blackness, but because black is the color of his robes. Also, I am not personally a believer in conspiracy theories of world domination. However, the Jesuits did go through a very political period, much as some clerics of different faiths express political views today. When the Jesuits went, though, through that political period, INRI to them stood for Instinctum or Justicum, Necar Regis Impium, which is Latin for it is just to kill an impious king. And aside, I have always been fascinated by etymology, the study of where words come from and how they developed. The above word, impious, comes from pious in the Old Testament. The Hebrew men are told not to trim or cut their sideburns. Today, still Orthodox Jews can be seen with long sideburns. Sometimes they are even braided. It is considered a sign of holiness or piety. In fact, that's where the word pious comes from. Pious is Hebrew for sideburns. The above now makes me think about the word holy and where it comes from. In ancient times, long before the births of Christianity or biblical Judaism, the type of religion or spiritual system followed by many people were shamanistic in nature. Part of many shamanistic cultures is the idea that a stone with a natural hole in it was considered very sacred. So too were other objects with natural holes, such as seashells. From this comes the idea that one sign of a sacred object was its natural hole. A holy object was sacred. From this came our word holy. Kabbalistically, the letters INRA represent much more. INRI, which in Hebrew would be Yud, Na, Resh, Yud, are also the first letters in the Hebrew for the 4 archetype elements, according to J.S.M. Ward in his books Freemasonry and the Ancient Gods. English, Hebrew, letter I, Yud, the element Yam, in translation will be water. The letter N, Nun, in Hebrew Nor, in translation would be fire. The letter R, Resh, in Hebrew rock, and the element translation is air. And the English letter I, Yud, in Hebrew Yudeshash, the translation being earth. According to the ancient Kabbalistic document, the Sefer Yetzirah, the Hebrew letters also have astrological meanings. I, Yud, being Virgo, N, Nun, being Scorpio, R, Resh, being soul or the sun, and I, Yud, being Virgo. For those of you who may be totally unfamiliar with astrology, let's examine briefly the meaning of these astrological signs on a very simple bias. Virgo is the pure and virginal sign of nature. Scorpio is a sign of energy, death, and transfiguration. Soul, the sun, is the source of light and life to everything on the earth. It is essential to our lives because it is central to our social system and solar system. There have been many savior gods in the history of our planet. For the Norse, it was Balber. For the Egyptians, it was Osiris. For the ancient Celtics of the British Isles, it was Lau. To the Hindus, it was and is Krishna. Just as in the Christian story of the only Son of God, all of these savior gods died and came back to life for the good of humanity. All of these resurrection gods are associated with the sun. They die in winter and are reborn with the warmth and plant and animal life which appears in the spring. Unfortunately, the topic of savior resurrection gods is far too extensive to cover in depth in this book. If this topic interests you, see the books in the bibliography. If we were to use the Egyptian pantheon of gods, Virgo is represented by the goddess Isis, who is nature, the mother of all things. Scorpio represents by Apophis, also known as Set or Typhon, who was death, the destroyer. Soul is represented by Osiris, who's slain and risen and was the Egyptian resurrection and vegetative deity. Since the I in the INRI formula is repeated and represents 2 of the magical elements, the three members of the Egyptian pantheon, Isis, Apophis, and Osiris, can represent the 4 archetypal elements of which everything in earth is composed. They can also represent famous thoughts of alchemy, and if you desire, they can represent some of the basic, albeit borrowed, ideas of Christianity. It is interesting to note that the Notoricon, the abbreviation made of the first letters of Isis, Apophis, and Osiris, I-A-O, pronounced I-E-O, forms the name of the supreme god of the Gnostics, an early sect of Christianity. Rosicrucian or Redeemer gods are always associated with Sol, the sun. The sun is the primary giver of light to our planet. It follows, therefore, that light is always associated with the idea of a Redeemer god. That is why beneficial or white occult groups always try to bring light, spiritual light, to mankind. In Latin, the word for light is spelled LVX and pronounced lux, with the U sounding like in tube. Lux. In rituals, we represent certain archetypal ideas to our psyches via poses and actions. It is easily possible to represent the idea of spiritual lux or light by spelling it out with various gestures. For example, L, left arm straight out to the side, horizontally with the palm forward, right arm straight up, palm to the left. V, both arms straight up over the head, forming the letter V. The palms should be facing each other. The angle between the arms should be about 60 degrees. X, the arms crossed on the chest, right over left. These gestures are the basis for what are known as the lux gestures. By knowing the ideas represented by our magical notion of light, we can use the gestures to aspire to the illumination, lux, implied by these gestures of the art. Here is another interesting thing in regard to the idea of lux. In Roman numerals, L equals 50, V equals 5, and X equals 10, for a total of 65. In Hebrew, the letters Aleph, 1, Dalet, 4, Nun, 50, and Yud, 10, also total 65. These Hebrew letters spell out the word Adonai, my Lord, one of the names of God. As you'll remember, it is used in the LBRP. If spiritual light, lux, equals 65, and divinity in the Adonai aspect equals 65, then according to gematria, we must assume that there is some relationship between the two. There is such a relationship. They are one of the same. The ultimate divinity is that infinite spiritual light known in the Hebrew as Ein Sof, or meaning limitless light, the third veil of negative existence before God begins manifesting at Keter. Before moving on to the next part of this lesson, there are still a few theoretical things to cover. First is the meaning of the magical word Ararita. It is a notorican, an abbreviation or acronym for the phrase in Hebrew pronounced Ichahad Rash Ikudoto Rash Ichudoto Timoro Atichad. The ch in this phrase is always pronounced like that in the Scottish word lock. The above phrase, represented by the notorican Ararita, means one is God's beginning. One principle is God's individuality. God's permutation is one. This clearly states the Kabbalistic attitude that no matter the name by which you call divinity, there is only one. That no matter which names you call divinity, there is only one ultimate divinity. One divine source which can be summoned. Everything is of divinity, or as is said in a ritual, there is no part of me which is not of the gods. There is a short series of hexagrams which you must learn. Actually, I think of them more as being paired triangles. These hexagrams, Israel Regardie in his book Ceremonial Magick suggests using Crowley's unisocial hexagon instead of the traditional 4 paired triangles. I have learned it both ways, and I quite frankly prefer the traditional style. That is what will be given here. Practice drawing them somewhat large in the air in front of you. It should be similar in size to the pentagram of the LBRP. Take note of the direction to face when drawing these hexagrams. Also note the archetypal element in which each is associated. The first thing you should be aware of is that the elements associated with the quarters of the circles have changed. This is because on a higher plane, the archetypal elements are associated with different quadrants. Each triangle begins at the apex, even if the triangle is inverted and the apex is at the bottom. And the figure is drawn counterclockwise until it returns to its point of origination. Any diagrams following, start drawing at the point numbered 1 and move in the direction of the arrow until you complete the triangle. And start at the point numbered 2 and move in the direction of the arrow until you complete the second triangle. Note that the hexagram of the west has a common line. However, for clarity, it is shown as two separate triangles. Before moving on to the next part of this lesson, it is time to alter the instructions for the tarot contemplation ritual. You should by now be using all of the major arcana cards in this ritual. When you choose a card in this advanced version, imagine yourself as the main character in the card. You may change the sex of the main figure of the card so that the sex of that character matches your own. If there is no main character or no human character, simply put yourself into the card anywhere. Visualize yourself in the card. Once you feel that you are in the card, will your eyes to open. If your physical eyes are closed, do not open them. However, when your psychic eyes are open, look around, see everything in the card from the view of yourself within the card. Try to see what is behind the design of which you can normally only see the front. Most importantly, determine if you can see anything beyond the edge of the card. Don't do anything, just look. Do not attempt to move or go anywhere. Then will your psychic eyes to close and return to normal consciousness. Record your experience, whether or not you experience any unusual sights, sounds, smells, tastes, feelings, or sensations in your magical diary. Take the next 7 days to read over what you have done so far in this lesson and practice this advanced tarot contemplation ritual, then move on to the next section. Part 4. Earlier in this lesson, I mentioned that I was going to discuss the difference between the wand and the dagger. Although the wand has traditionally been associated with the magical element of fire and the dagger has been associated with air, some people, especially in recent years, have reversed these associations. This is a large part due to those people who have been using what they call Wicca or witchcraft. While it is true that witchcraft is thousands of years old, it is also true that much of what is today called witchcraft is either a creation or a recreation by the late Gerald B. Gardner. This is not meant to belittle anybody who follows a pagan path. In fact, those who follow one of the various pagan paths in many cases seem to have regained the link between humanity and nature that most ceremonial magicians only talk about and secretly envy. As you have noticed, one of the more important areas which this course has emphasized is the atonement to the elements, something which has been sadly lacking in most books, of course, on high magic. It is clear that Gardner simplified some seemingly complex magical techniques and philosophy borrowed from the ubiquitous A. Crowley. Then, with the help of Dora and Valentine, they created modern witchcraft. It does not matter whether or not he received initiation from the new force, which is as he claimed, nor does it matter that many have gone far beyond his initial researches, trainings, and techniques, for he has introduced many to a form of spiritual which not be found elsewhere when he began his work. His contributions thankfully will last for many years to come. However, as I said, some of what Gardner did was simplification of traditional magical philosophy. One of these simplifications was the equating of the dagger with the sword. This is understandable, as a sword does appear to be nothing more than a longer dagger. And if you had only learned the LBRP, you might know that Magickal bears a sword and stands to the south, the direction of the element of fire. Water, of course, would be associated with the chalice, and earth with the pentacle. This leaves the wand to the element air, and Raphael, the archangel of that element, does hold the caduceus wand. This all seems so logical. Unfortunately, for the above simplification, it is not correct to equate the purposes of any of the several wands used by a magician. The fire wand is not the same as the lotus wand, and neither are those the same as the wands carried by the initiatic officers of occult groups. They all have different functions, each though they have the same basic shape. Too much is the dagger different in design and function than the magical sword. If it helps to clear things in your mind, some people like to think of the dagger as being the tip of a spear which is thrown through the air. The traditional air dagger is a simple double-edged blade with a T-shaped handle as shown below. Since the air daggers should never have been used to cut living things, it should preferably be new, undercoat the handle and the T, but protect the blade from paint. Follow the instructions on the paint concerning the treatment of the wood and / or metal before applying the paint. Then paint the undercoated parts a bright yellow. On page 152, you will find a listing of the Hebrew words and sigils to be painted in bright purple or mauve around the handle and T crossbar. As you will see, there are 8 groups of these, the same number as for the earth pentacle. In fact, all the tools have 8 sets of words and sigils. I've already discussed the motto, the number VIII, so let's look at the others. I is the god name associated with the tool. II is the name of the archangel associated with the tool. Notice that for the dagger, the name is Raphael, the archangel associated with the magical element air. III, the name of the angelic associated with the tool. IV, the name of the ruler of the element. V, there are said to be 4 rivers coming out of paradise. V names the river associated with the element. VI is the name of the direction associated with the element and tool in Hebrew. VII is the name of the element in Hebrew, and VIII is the motto. After completing the painting, coat the handle with a clear plastic such as Varanthine. Note that the above numeration will stay the same for all of the tools. Let me make clear that this course is presenting traditional Western occultism. From this standpoint, other associations are incorrect. However, within their own systems, other attributions may be totally correct, and the traditional system represented here would be in error. The only moral of this paragraph, if you can call it that, is if you do not totally understand the system you are using, do not mix it with other systems. It will only cause you problems. This is not to say that you cannot blend multiple systems once they are fully comprehended. That was a prime achievement of the Golden Dawn. On the other hand, I am aware of a person who could not involve in a Western magical group, although he tried, then didn't like the Wiccan group he became involved with because it did not have the same magical traditions. He was too complicated and the other too easy. The result is that he has formed his own ancient Kabbalistic Celtic coven. My only regrets are for the students he is teaching and the problems they may have in the future. It is said that when the student is really the teacher will appear. Unfortunately, this is true even when the student is ready to be mistaught. Part of your work for this lesson is the construction of the air dagger as described. It is not expected that your artwork will hit the level of Da Vinci or Michelangelo, only that is done to the best of your abilities. Symbols in Hebrew for the air dagger. Air dagger made by Chico Siqueiro. Part 5. It is possible to classify the study of psychology into 2 broad areas, normal and abnormal psychology. Unfortunately, the study of abnormal psychology is beyond the scope of this course. If you are interested in this particular field from an occult viewpoint, you'll enjoy the book The Secrets of Dr. Taverner, 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 by Dion Fortune. Let us look at normal psychology stated with Freud, besides being brought up at the end of the Victorian age, a fact which colored his entire outlook on life. He also came from a Jewish background. From his writings, it is clear to even the most casual reader the harmony which exists between his thoughts and a rather simple version of psychology as described in the Kabbalah. In fact, although the Kabbalah and Freud argued for the idea of a subconscious or unconscious, Many of Freud's contemporaries did not believe such a thing existed. In his later years, Freud said that if he had his life to live over again, he would spend it in the study of parapsychology rather than psychology. I think it is safe to assume that Freud was either consciously or unconsciously influenced by the Kabbalah. As shown in an earlier lesson, Freud divided the mind into three categories: the id, ego, and superego. In the 1970s, a simplified form of Freudism known as the traditional analysis, as popularized in the book I'm Okay, You're Okay, tried to put the abstract Freudian ideas into terms understandable by lay people. Thus, id, ego, and superego were replaced with child, parent, and adult, respectively. And it is true that most people can relate better to the idea of a child wanting its way and throwing tantrums if he or she doesn't get it than to the word id, which has an easy picture in most people's minds. But the Kabbalah goes so much further in its understanding of the mind that Freud and Jung seemed like beginners. One of the biggest problems with standard psychology theory is that it begins with the birth or slightly before. Thus, it must fail to answer some basic questions such as, what was mind doing before the inception of my body? If reincarnation is a fact, why do I have trouble remembering past lives? And if it is not a fact, why do I have fleeting memories of past lives? Why is there such a desire by people and cultures all over the world to reunite with God, to be more than they are? Jung saw this and called it a desire for religion, a basic human instinct which Freud did not acknowledge. The Kabbalah answers this and more. Some of these discussions will have to be saved for a later discussion of reincarnation, the most complete analysis of which has been hidden for centuries within the Kabbalah. For now, we must merely look at the change known as death. Let us assume that you have died and been reincarnated into a newborn infant. According to the Kabbalah, the soul enters the body with the first breath the infant takes. Perhaps you want to finish that good book you are reading or see that movie you missed just before you died. Unfortunately, you discover that your muscles do not work the way you remember they worked. This is not psychological, it's physiological. Nerves and bones have not finished developing. Various muscular activity cannot take place due to the lack of development. You can no longer feed yourself. You can't communicate through speech or writing. You can't even control your bowels or bladder. After a short while, things which were part of your normal existence are now part of a terrifyingly new world. In order to cope, you must quickly develop new modes of communication. You learn that cooing brings smiling, happy faces, and warm, protective bodies. You learn that crying brings worried looks, your mother's breasts, or a needed change of diapers. In order to survive, your real consciousness submerges, a false consciousness arises. Eventually, this false consciousness takes over. It becomes the consciousness or ego. It is covered, which is developed so that we can exist. It is necessary, but it is not your true self. And what of your true self? It has submerged to a point where most people are rarely ever allowed to come out. This is especially true in so-called civilized societies. It is any wonder that there is so much rebellion in this world. So many people instinctively trying to release their true inner selves seem like rebels without causes. But in fact, there is a cause. The true self, the part of us which survives that is called death, is not material. Our true self is spiritual and non-material in nature. It is our higher self, our direct link to the divine. It becomes hidden compared to our false outer self. Our true self, our link to the divine, is our unconsciousness. And there have been so many fights, disagreements, and wars caused by people who didn't know what they really wanted. Communion with the Godhead, that is what is really desired, is a link between the conscious and the unconscious. This is a main focus of our magical work. It is the very essence of white magic. As you have probably guessed, the Kabbalah does not divide the mind into 3 main categories, but into 10. On the next page, you will see how the 10 aspects of mind relate to the tree of life. The first thing you will notice is the dividing line at the abyss. the space between the upper 3 Sephiroth and the lower 7. The 3 above are immortal and last for as long as the divine source wishes them to exist. The 7 below are mortal and cease to exist when the body dies. A quick glance will show that the memory is mortal, thus it is obvious that our memory of past lives will tend to be very minimal at best. Here then is an easy explanation as to why we tend not to remember much more than hints of our past lives. The Yichida is our true self, our link to the divine, our transcendental ego. It relates to what Freud called the superego. The Chia is our true will. It is creative and inquisitive inner impulse from the divine, which causes us to reach outside and inside of ourselves to become better than we are. It makes us try harder, to want to be the best and do better than we have done before. This does not imply competition. We all advance together. Sometimes this impulse is subdued, but is always come back in force. This was exemplified by the age of exploration which followed the Dark Ages, and by our current reach into the vastness of space. It also explains urge to commune with the Godhead, to know the joy and ecstasy of the knowledge and conversation of your holy guardian angel, to practice white magic. The Neshiyama is the institution. It is the seat of all the psychic abilities of humanity. There is a method of instruction called the Socratic method. It is based upon the teaching methods of Socrates. He believes that people did not learn new things, rather they remembered which they had forgotten at death before their current incarnation. By asking questions, Socrates would elicit from the student answers which would lead the student to discover of an idea or principle which the student could not have known. Today, this system of involving a student rather than merely telling a student seems to be the most effective way to teach. It allows a student to have a growing, inquiring mind. It also allows for intuitive leaps and bounds, resulting in an individual who is creative rather than a robot only capable of rote repetition. Part of the definition of magic is that it is a science. As magicians, we should understand modern scientific thought. One such canon of science is the theory of evolution. Evolution is not, as many think, a smooth line. Rather, it moves and jumps and jerks. Current evolutionary thought calls this punctuated equilibrium. Likewise, the advancement of the mind in humanity has often come in sudden steps. The laser was the accidental result of communications research. Today, lasers are used for everything from playing records to brain surgery, previously impossible to perform even with the sharpest of scalpels. This is an example of a link to the divine via the unconscious will. This uncontrolled link is an aspect of the Nichima. A controlled link to the divine is an aspect of the Chia. Thus, from our point of view, the Chia is active while the Neshama is receptive. As always, it is the goal of the Kabbalist to blend opposites and bring balance into manifestation. By allowing the Nichima to be in our awareness, we develop psychic abilities. By being conscious of the Chia, we are able to do magic. The Ryuch is our consciousness, our intellect, our false self. It equates with the Freud's idea of the ego. Notice that it is composed of 5 parts: memory, imagination, reason, desire, and will. The aspect of will related to the Ryuch is different from Chia. The Chia is our true will. As such, it is in alignment with the will of the divine. The will of the Ryuch is that which is moved by our superficial and transitory desires. The true will of the Chia is to create, to love, and to seek unity with the Godhead. The will aspect of the Ryuch is to have sexual release. So eat good smelling food, although you know that food is neither good nor needed to be better than those around you, even if it means hardship for them or their destruction. The Nefesh is the lower self, the most superficially layer of the unconsciousness, wherein dwells the darkest side of ourselves. It is usually under the tight control of the Ryuch. Earlier, I equated the Nefesh with the Freudian id. While correct, it is not precise. The id is really a process, not an aspect of the mind. It is frequently submerged and hidden within the nefesh, but is not exactly the nefesh. The process called the id, when submerged in the nefesh, is said to be controlled by the rayush. However, when the rayush does not control the id and the nefesh dominates, the id is free to roam the aspects of the mind and come out in sometimes unfortunate places. Part of the techniques of magic which you have been learning include the control of this id energy so that it can be used as you wish under the control of the united Yetsheda and Arayush. The nefesh is also the source of the astral body and seat of the energy called prana, correct pronunciation pranya. In Sanskrit, in the Kabbalah, this energy is also known as Rayush, but should not be confused with the Rayush meaning consciousness. Note that there is a difference between the energy called Rayush or prana and the id. The id is a process, a motion, while the Rayush or prana is that which moves. Freudian's definition of the libido, as described earlier in this course, would have made it the same as prana or Rayush energy. Finally, the bottommost Sephiroth is related to the guf, the physical body. Many people wonder how the body can be an aspect of mind. To me, the interrelation is quite obvious on many levels. First, as you incarnate, you choose a particular shaped body depending on the types of experiences you need in life. More on this in the discussion of reincarnation. Also, the image, the different thoughts of someone born with severe handicaps as opposed to a person born physically normal. There are also differences in the psyches of people who are considered ugly and those who are considered beautiful according to the dictates of society. There are even differences in the psyche of people who tend to be slim and those who tend to be obese. The physical body plays an important role as part of the psyche and should not be ignored. But after all this information, we are left with the feeling of, that's interesting, but so what? Actually, once you know the basis for Kabbalistic psychology, there is much that you can do with it. The two keys to what you can do are 1, the understanding the tree of life, and 2, understanding the tarot and how it fits on the tree of life. Let us say that it has been so long since you have been involved in a relationship that you cannot feel desire for someone, even though that person indicates a desire for you. A possible diagnosis here is that you no longer have a memory of what loving relationships is like. You need something to trigger the memories. Looking at the tree, we have seen that what is needed is an infusion or imagination, which is linked by a direct path to the Yetsheda, our link to the divine. Contemplating the card known as the Hermit will bring imagination back into the memory. Spend a few minutes contemplating the Hermit each day for a week. If the goal of bringing up desire has not been achieved, it is probably not because you have failed, but because you have not brought the memory down to the level of desire. Contemplation of the Wheel of Fortune card for a few minutes a day will accomplish this. Perhaps you feel that you are a very logical person and pride yourself on your reasoning talents. From the standpoint of the Kabbalah, there is absolutely nothing wrong with this. It is fine to be proud of your talents, and not to do so would be a lie. But perhaps you feel that you are not creative enough in your life. Here, a short period of daily contemplation on the card titled The Devil will reward you immensely. It does not mean that you will be satanically inspired. Hopefully, it will allow you to learn about and break out of your satanic enthrallment to cold logic and reason. Coming from the other side, if you find yourself very creative but with illogical time-wasting ideas, contemplating of this same card will allow reason to enter your world and guide, but not over-control your imagination. Thus, neatly packed into the Tree of Life, we have a complete system not only for psychotherapy, but also a system of dealing with day-to-day situations, improving your own life. It is also a wonderful way of becoming familiar with the Tree of Life. Sometime in the future, people will have forgotten that there was a series of light bulb jokes which all began with how many light bulbs or how many blanks does it take to change a light bulb. The answers were frequently blackly humorous. One version of this joke goes, "How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb?" The answer is only one, but it has to want to change. The reason I bring this up is that anytime you wish to use magic to change somebody's mind, you must ask for that person's permission first, and the person must give it to you. You have no right to change a person, even if it is for the betterment of that person, unless that person wants the change. The reason I say this is to suggest that you do not go up to a friend who you think needs changing and say, "Here, look at this card for 3 minutes a day for the next week," without telling that person the reasons of how it works. That person may not want to change in any way you think he or she should. If they ask for your help, fine. If they agree with what you have been informed on what you are doing, fine. But changing a person's mind without his or her permission is nothing but black magic, and you will be one to suffer most. Start working on improving yourself before trying to help others who may be helping healthier than you think. Part 6. Egotism. We all have it to a greater or lesser degree. Many people react negatively to hearing this and insist that they are not egotistic. Well, if you don't have a strong ego, something is wrong with you. We all need strong egos, strong senses of self to survive and grow. What we need to do is isolate different aspects of ego from one another and eliminate those aspects we no longer desire. The positive aspects of our egos, which tell us I'm great at some things and other people are great at various things too, should be encouraged and built upon. That aspect which says to us I'm great and everyone else is wrong needs to be overcome. I've gone through periods of the latter. Luckily, I've had techniques and teachers which allowed me and still allow me to overcome the problems of negative egotism when I become aware of it. It is unfortunate but true that people who teach metaphysical topics can end up being led to believe in their own non-existent greatness as the result of the adulation of students. One of the reasons I suggest you read at least one other book on the topics of these lessons while you are studying this course is that you will get other opinions and ideas, some of which may contradict the ideas presented here. In Eastern mystical traditions, the physical phenomenal world is considered an illusion, Maya, which hides the true spiritual reality behind the phenomenal world. Our higher self can know the true universe, but it is cut off by our dominant egos, which only see the illusion. Thus, our egos slay the true inner reality. We are told that to achieve enlightenment, we must slay the slayer. Get rid of the egos and see the inner reality. Crowley wrote about this frequently, yet although he claimed to yet have succeeded, it is very questionable as to whether he really freed himself from his ego. According to Israel Regardie in the West, our goal is not to get rid ourselves of our egos, but to perfect our egos so that they are in harmony with our higher selves. I doubt if a large percentage of Western mystics have achieved that state. What both Crowley and Regardie seem to imply is a very mechanistic mind. Mechanistic mind. That is, they seem to see the amount of ego reaching a certain level which, by following certain instructions, can be raised or lowered. I don't agree. The mind seems to be far more flowing and changeable than their mechanistic versions. We can quickly or gradually change from large to small amounts of negative egotism depending on such things as weather, your health, our physical environment, and perhaps various astrological influences. What we need to have are devices to aid us by first allowing us a sense that a problem exists, i.e. an increase in negative egotism, and then gives us some way to deal with it. You might be asking yourself why I'm giving you this information now. It's because I want to tell you some more about the pitfalls of leading a group and my worst failure as a teacher. Several years ago, I had a student who I believed had more potential as a magician than anyone I have met before or since. I tried to lead him into becoming a good magician while grounded in occult philosophy. Unfortunately, due to the differences of opinion between myself and this student, we ended up going separate ways. One of the reasons for this was that he did not like the way I did some of my private tutorings. As I discussed earlier, I prefer to Socratic methods of teaching. I read somewhere a simple explanation of it. Tell me, and I'll forget. Show me, and I might remember. Involve me, and I'll understand. When this student asked me a question, I would answer in a way designed to lead him to a deeper understanding of the implications of the question and not give just a simple yes or no. He did not like the idea of having to think about the answers. He wanted a yes or no answer to complex questions. I refused to give him that which he really wanted, magical power with no personal work. About a year after he had stopped being my student, I was asked by an international occult order to start a chapter at that order in the city where I then lived. I knew several people who would be interested and who might make good members, including this former student. Naturally, on the day before I had planned to call him, I accidentally ran into him and told him about it. In a short time, he and I and some others were working together. I soon realized that previous commitments would not allow me the time to lead the group. Because he had more latent magical talent, the charisma, than other members of the group, I chose him to be my successor. This person is very intelligent. He has worked as a secretary for many years and because of it has two problems. First, since many secretaries do what they are told and allow their bosses to have the responsibility for the successor heirs, he has the attitude that magically he can do whatever he wants. And if he errs, he can always do it over and use some sort of magical whiteout. This is a very dangerous attitude to have when doing practical magic of this sort that he is doing. And both he and one of his close assistants have told me of the times when he has summoned up something and not been able to banish it. Had he been more advanced, the manifestation could have been more physical. The result could have been life-threatening. Secondly, as a secretary, he does what he is told and thus has a feeling of impotence and lack of power. I did not realize this at the time I turned the organization over to him. It was a big error. Rather than allowing him to develop more quickly, as I had hoped it would do, the power of being the local head of a group gave him a feeling that he could do anything and get away with anything. He began to lie and break his oaths left and right. He tried to give away some of the secrets of the organization he was a member of in order that he might learn the inner secrets of other organizations. Finally, although remaining a member of the organization, he decided that the order was not spiritual at all, so he became a de facto member of a well-known, very authoritarian pseudo-Hindu order. Since this so-called order tells its devotees when to get up, when to go to sleep, what to read, what to think, when to bathe, what to wear, when to have sex, when to eat, etc., it seemed to me that this organization would be perfect for this person who was used to take the ordering anyway. However, he insisted on claiming to teach people the methods of the organization to which I had introduced him. From what I have seen, he had already been slowly twisting the techniques and using the politics to try to get himself into the total leadership position of the group. He also tried to make this pseudo-Hindu order a group accused of brainwashing and mind controlling by many authorities, look very positive to his followers, and make several of its followers into members of the group. Fortunately, the occult order, his attempt failed. Although the branch, which I started with about 10 people now, has only 2 active members and is about to fold, unfortunately for the leader, it has been alleged to me that his failures has led him to drug addiction and prostitution. One of the little-known facts of teaching is that a teacher must accept the karma of what he/she teaches. If a teacher's students use the techniques wisely, it benefits the teacher's karma. If they use the teachings to do negative things, it hurts the teacher's karma. In this case, I have to accept some of this person's karma for his using the things I taught him in a negative way. And because he is messing up some of his students, I also have to accept some of their karma as well. Needless to say, there are things I am doing magically to end this karmic link. I find, however, that I am continually drawn to stay near him, so that when he fails, as he invariably does, I am around to pick up the pieces of both him and his students should they want my help. The reason I have gone through this long story is to show you some of the problems caused by egotism when forming or being a member of a magical group. The egotism of S.L. McGregor Mathers, one-time undisputed leader of the Golden Dawn, helped cause the breakup of that organization. Crowley's egotism caused his OTO and AA to shrink in numbers until they were very small by the time of his death. There are far more people who studied and idolized Crowley today than there ever were during his lifetime. Egotism and power hunger have broken up more magical groups, covens, etc. than any other single cause. So how do we avoid the problem of negative egotism in ourselves and others? First, we must acknowledge that if it is not on the surface, it is lurking just under the surface. Second, we have to learn how to recognize it. A simple way to do this is to look at attitudes. The negative egotistical attitude is presented in the book Krishna Sikh, Consciousness, the Topmost Yoga System, by the late founder of the Hare Krishnas. In it, page 40, he says, "Give up research, throw it away, just become submissive. Listen only to authorized sources. Of course, the authorized sources you should listen to and the organization you should be submissive to in the case of the Hare Krishnas. On the other hand, look at the note at the beginning of Crowley's book 4. Others have said, believe me. He, Crowley, says, don't believe me. He wants an independent and self-reliant body of students to follow out their methods of research. If he can save them time and trouble by giving them a few useful tips, his work will have been done to his own satisfaction. It is with this last viewpoint that I hereby concur. If you are the head of a group and you find yourself thinking that you have all the answers, any other way is wrong, it is time to get the work on yourself. Also, if you find yourself thinking you know all there is to know about the Kabbalah and the magic and occultism, it is time to work on yourself. For most of us, our sense of self, our ego, is based on the link between consciousness and body. Even those of us who spend many hours in astral projection still think of me as being the mind-body unit. The mind, being non-physical, cannot possess, cannot be superior or inferior, cannot have or do anything other than exist and seek unity with the divine. But when mind-body are thought of as one, it can have possessions, can be physically, mentally superior or inferior to other mind-body units. Thus, the key to overcoming negative egotism is to realize and accept that merely understand that the mind is not the body. The mind is the true self and the body is just a servant for the true self when living in the physical universe. The following are gentle versions of techniques, some of which are given by Crowley in his books, which will help you in this endeavor. 1. Sit in a chair, back straight, knees together, feet flat on the floor. Your hands should be palms down on your thighs with the thumbs just touching. Now just hold this position. In a short time, your body will start to tremble and your legs move apart and separate the thumbs. You will soon learn that this simple basic position can rapidly become very uncomfortable. The body, it turns out, quickly becomes uncomfortable in many positions. Just try and lie in any position for a short time and you will see for yourself that this is true. It is possible with practice to overcome the feelings of pain and discomfort. Since the body becomes painful in any position, it must be that something else overcomes the pain. That something else is not part of the physical body. It is the mind. When you start to see negative egotism slipping into your life, make an agreement with yourself not to say the word I. For at least 2 weeks during that time, keep a pad of paper with you. Anytime you say the word I, put a small mark on a dated page. At first, the page will be filled with marks, but as you go through the 2 weeks period, the number will lessen. The effect of not saying the word I for a few weeks is quite astonishing. It tends very nicely to separate the idea of yourself from the mind-body unit. To improve and speed up the result, you might wish to give $1 or a quarter or a dime to your favorite charity for each of your breaks. That is, each time you say I. This exercise is a charitable version of Crowley's technique. He would have slashed your arm with a razor blade every time you had a break. I find the method given above quite satisfactory and much safer. 3. Do the tarot contemplation ritual twice a day, once using the advanced technique and once using the original basic technique. Part 7. I have always found amazing the large numbers of people who talk magic only a tiny amount of people who practice or live magic. The vast majority of people I have met, who claim to be magicians show little knowledge of any rituals other than simple variations on the LBRP. Don't get me wrong though, I cannot overstress the importance of the LBRP. Becoming proficient in magic is a precarious task, and the LBRP is the rather tiny support. If you are not proficient at the LBRP, the entire system can fall down around you. This is why the LBRP is taught right at the beginning. In fact, other than initiation rituals, it was the only ritual given out to members of the Golden Dawn until they entered the Inner Order. This would take over 1 year of practice. Thus, if you start actual practice on a daily basis of other rituals, such as the Middle Pillar ritual and the ritual which is to follow, you'll be doing the practical work that so many people who call themselves magicians talk about, but so few actually practice. Let me reaffirm to you now that magical practice is not just self-delusion or mental masturbation. During sexual stimulation, the chemistry of the body actually changes. Various hormones are released into the bloodstream, which causes the obvious signs of sexual arousal. Drugs called endorphins are created by the body and released into the blood and eventually arrive at the brain. Endorphins are similar to opiates and increase the pain threshold. As a result, bites and scratches, which at other times would be painful, become very pleasurable for some people. However, the changes due to sexual arousal are temporary. The practice of ritual magic will make longer lasting changes. These include longevity, youthfulness, increased IQ, and others. But unless you practice on a regular basis, nothing will happen. Magic is experimental, not mental. The purpose of the LBRP, among other things, is to clear your immediate area of physical and non-physical distractions. This is especially refers to what might be considered negative influences. However, when doing great magic, it becomes important to clear your area not only of lower or negative influences, but also to clear your area of positive or higher influences. This is because when you want to get into contact with one aspect of divinity, you do not want anything, whether it be positive or negative, getting in the way. Perhaps at some time in your life you have had someone have a romantic crush on you. They always want to be around you. They want to help you in every way possible, and want to touch you as much as possible. Their motivation is completely based on their idea of love, yet they can quickly become a terrible annoyance, a pain in the neck. Even though they come to you out of love and affection, two things which are undeniably very positive, they can get in the way of your efficient functioning at school, at work, in your personal and professional life. It may be fun for a short while, but soon it will get its way in you. We try to break our admirer of his or her obsession and stop the interference until our life. Similarly, it is important to prevent even positive interference into our magical work. We must clear our immediate area, the area wherein we will work our magic, not only of negative influences, but also of positive influences. In short, we want to have an area for magical work, but have been cleared of all influences. The LBRP clears the area of negative influences. The banishing ritual of the hexagram, BRH, clears the area of positive influences. Just as with the LBRP, the banishing ritual of the hexagram must be mastered. Although I thoroughly enjoy the LBRP, I have always considered it to be on the level of doing my laundry. It is important and must be done regularly, or you can get in trouble. I still do it on an average of twice a day. I feel good about doing it too. But I also think that a ritual done daily should have more. When I first learned the BRH, I found that more. While the evocation of the archangels in the LBRP is powerful, it seems to me to always be increasing in power. The invocations and physical actions of the BRH are to me quite awe-inspiring. I never cease to get the chills when I pause after commanding the divine light to descend. and when the section is repeated at the end of the ritual, it is almost overpowering. At times I wanted to cry over this ritual's magnificence and yet simple beauty. Much of the rituals of the Golden Dawn is filled with such beauty. Is there any more magnificent and beautiful way to adore the Lord of the universe and space than by the Golden Dawns? Holy art thou, Lord of the universe. Holy art thou, whom nature hath not formed. Holy art thou, the vast and mighty one, Lord of the light and of the darkness. As I wrote when I introduced the LBRP, the area you are working in becomes the temple of the Godhead. The LBRP is a preparation, a cleansing of the temple. The BRH has aspects which are nothing less than simple, glorious, honest worship along with its already mentioned banishing qualities. The banishing ritual of the hexagram. Preliminaries. 1. Perform the relaxation ritual. 2. Perform the LBRP. If you have any questions about the symbolism, reread part 3 of this lesson. Section 1. The analysis of the key word. Step 1. Stand behind the altar, if you have one, with your arms out to the side so that your body forms a cross. You should be facing east. If you have a ritual wand, you should use it in this ritual. You should be facing east. Let me repeat that. It should be held in the right hand with its point up. Step 2. Say meaningfully. I-N-R-I, Yud Nun Resh Yud, the sign of Osiris slain. As you say the letters in Hebrew, the second line of the above verbalization, draw then from right to left in front of you. Use the tip of your wand or your finger index or your right index finger. The letters are formed from top to bottom. As you draw them, visualize them in bright blue flames. They look like this. Step 3. Form the letter L by raising your right hand straight up from the shoulder. If you have a wand, it should still be pointing up. This is similar to the position of the right arm of the Magician card in the Rider White Tarot deck, except that the arm should be straight up. Your left hand should be straight out to the side, palm forward. Look at your left hand with your head slightly bowed. Say meaningfully, L, the sign of the morning of Isis. Step 4. Raise the arms to a position over your head so that they form an angle of about 60 degrees. This makes the letter V. The palms should be facing each other. Tilt your head back and look up. Say meaningfully, V, the sign of Typhon and Apophis. Step 5. Now cross your arms on your chest, right over left. Your fingertips should be just touching your shoulders. This forms the letter X. Bow your head. Say meaningfully, X, the sign of Osiris risen. Step 6. Now, form each letter saying the name of each letter as you do so. This is called by the word they spell, which is pronounced to rhyme with the word boots. L, V, X, Lux. Step 7. At the word light in the following statement, spread your arms and look forward. Then recross the arms as before and bow your head while saying meaningfully, the light of the cross. Step 8. Again, Return to the first position, arms out to the side, looking forward. Say meaningfully: Virgo, Isis, Mighty, Mother; Scorpio, Apophis, Destroyer, Soul; Osiris, Slain and Risen. Step 9. Gradually rise your arms towards the V position while slowly raising your head. As you do, say meaningfully: Isis, Apophis, Osiris. Step 10. By the time your hands reach the V position, you should be looking up at the level of step 4 above. Vibrate. E-I-O. In letters, it is spelled I-A-O. Step 11. Take a few seconds to aspire to the light. LVX. And through visualization, draw it down over your head and down to your feet. When you can feel this beginning to happen, say meaningfully: let the divine light descend. Feel it cover you and further purify you so that you become positive enough to exit without negative or positive influences around you. If you wish, you may relax in this state for a few minutes before continuing with the ritual. Section 2. The formation of the hexagrams. Step 12. As in the LBRP, go to the east, or if there is not enough room, continue facing east from where you stand. Make the hexagram of fire in front of you with the wand or index finger. You should visualize it as a golden flame, just as the pentagram from the LBRP. Upon which the hexagrams are overlaid are in blue flame. Step 13. Inhale, drawing in energy while bringing your hands next to your ears. As you exhale, step forward with your left foot and thrust both hands toward the center of the hexagram, the middle of the baseline of the top triangle. At the same time, vibrate the magical word of power, Ararita. Review the LBRP for exact instructions on inhaling and exhaling energy and the position of the interior. Both are duplicated in this ritual. Step 14. With your hands or the right index finger, point to the center of the fire hexagram and move around the circle to the south. This matches what you did in the LBRP. If there is not enough room to circulate or to move around, circumambulate, simply turn in place. Coming from the tip of the finger or wand, you should see the formation of an intense bright white light. This goes over the bright white line which connects the pentagrams of the LBRP. When you reach the south, form the hexagram of earth in bright golden flame. Inhale and exhale the energy as before. Make the sign of the enterer toward the middle of your earth hexagram, the center of the interlacing triangles. As you do so, vibrate the word of power, Ararita. Step 14. In a similar manner, move or pivot to the west, carrying the brilliant white line. At this direction, form the hexagram of air. Repeat the charging process, again pointing to the center of the hexagram at the middle of the common baselines. Vibrate the word of power, as stated before. Step 16. Move or pivot to the north, carrying the white line. Here, from the hexagram of water, the middle of the hexagram is where the apexes of the triangles meet. This is where you'll point when you vibrate the word of power. Same as before. Step 17. Carry the white line from the north back to the east, completing the circle of white light with the golden hexagrams at the quarters. If you have had room to move about rather than pivoting in place, return to your position in the middle of the circle behind the altar. If you have one otherwise, the middle of the circle, face east. At this time, you should have around you blue hexagrams from the LBRP connected by a white line. In the same locations as the pentagrams, there should be golden hexagrams which are also connected by a circle of white light. All of the colors should be incredibly intense, bright, and virtually pulsating with energy. They should be just short of blinding in intensity. Step 18. At this point, there are two options. A, you may repeat the analysis of the key word. This is especially good when doing white magic rituals, as you can bask in the glow of the divine light for as long as you desire at the end. The intensity of this light is increased by the act of formulating the hexagrams. For general purposes, this is the ending I prefer. You may do the Kabbalistic cross as in the LBRP. This is slightly shorter and has the effect of creating a stronger link between the LBRP and the BRH. It is good for great magic rituals on a practical level. It will save some time if you are doing a long involved ritual. This completes the banishing ritual of the hexagram. This is as long as time consuming as your daily ritual work will get. You may wish to add things such as meditation, that is fine, but nothing else is going to be added to your regular work. Here then is your daily ritual work. It should be done at least once a day. 1. The relaxation ritual. 2. The lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. 3. The banishing ritual of the hexagram. 4. The middle pillar ritual. 5. The circulation of the body of light. 6. The Eteric contemplation ritual advanced version. And 7. A completion of your ritual diary. As with all the basic rituals, the banishing ritual of the hexagram should be memorized. Until you do so, you will find the summary on the next page is useful or helpful. Remember, there is only one way to succeed in ritual magic. That way is to practice, practice, practice. You will never succeed if you do not do the necessary work. There is no secret key which allows you to bypass the work, even if you have to fumble around with the summaries included in this book. That is okay. What is not okay is any of the excess for lack of practice on a regular schedule. If you wish to do the BRH in a ceremony with other people, there are a couple of nice ways to do it. It should always be done after the LBRP. One person can do the entire BRH, or it can be divided by having one person do the analysis of the keyword and another do the formulation of the hexagrams. If you have enough people, a glorious way to do this is by having 3 people do the analysis and another 4 do the hexagrams. The analysis of the keyword: person 1 I, person 2 N, person 3 R, person 1 I. Pause. Person 1 Yud, person 2 Nun, person 3 Reish, person 1 Yud. All, the sign of Osiris slain. The spelling of the Hebrew is not done in this version. In the following section, each participant makes the appropriate signs. For the formulation of the hexagrams, you can have one person stand at each quarter, have the first person do the appropriate part at the east and carry the line to the south. At this corner, the second person forms the hexagram, charges it with Ararita, and carries the line to the west. Here, the third person does the appropriate part and carries the line to the north. The person at the north finishes by doing the appropriate hexagram and carrying the line to the east. After each person has finished the appropriate portion and carrying of the connected line to the next quarter, that person continues in a clockwise direction around the inside of the circle and returns to the quarter at which he or she began. Thus, at the end of this section, each ceremonialist is back at the quarter at which he or she began. When the formulation of the hexagrams is complete and everyone is back at his/her original direction, all turn inward and face the center. Together they shall raise their hands with wands if they have them. Straight up in the air, they should slowly bring them down so that they are parallel with the ground and pointing at the ritualists in the center who will finish the ritual. As they lower their hands, they should start intoning the vowel ah quietly and in a low tone. As they move their arms, the sound should raise in pitch and volume so by the time they are pointing straight ahead, the ah sounds should be very high in pitch and quite loud. A pre-selected person, when he or she feels it is right, should suddenly raise his or her arms, which signals the 4 to be quiet. Then they should lower their arms, keeping the wands pointing up though, and return to their seats in the circle. I found this ceremonial version of the banishing ritual of the hexagram to be moving and spiritually powerful. Part 8. One of the things which I will not be discussing in this course is the subject of astrology. I mention this here so that you do not notice its lack later on and think that I am an anti-astrology. Nothing could be further from the truth. I have had the honor of knowing several excellent astrologers who have amazed me with their talents. I even have one friend who insists that magic and astrology are inextricably linked. He has gone so far as to design his own magical system based upon art and astrology. The plain fact of the matter is that for the systems of magic taught in these lessons, only a minimum amount of astrological knowledge is necessary. Most of it can be understood by comprehending the tree of life rather than recourse to deep study of astrology. On the other hand, the better you know astrology, the better you will understand the tree of life. So although a knowledge of astrology is not needed for this course, it is suggested that you learn something about the subject. The easy way. So many people are looking for it. The pages of the tabloids are filled with ads offering instant fame, money, memory, love, and success. Other offers include simple spell kits designed to allow you to curse your neighbors even if you had no magical training whatsoever. Unfortunately, there is no such thing as an instant gift of magical powers. They must be earned as the result of three things: practice, practice, practice. I've said it before and I'm repeating it here. To become a magician, to develop psychic magical powers requires work and study. If you think there is a shortcut, you lose. As an example of what I mean, I would like to describe an ad I saw repeating several times in a national magazine. It was a full-page ad, the center of which showed a drawing of a hand holding a small stick. The ad proclaimed that you could make good luck your slave with the magic stick, the miracle stick. This stick could allegedly bring you anything. If you read the small part of the ad, you learn that the stick must be burned, and if you examine the drawing closely, you will see that the stick being held by the disembodied hand is just a stick of incense. The price is many times the retail value of the incense. The distributor of the item would not be putting out full-page ads if people were not sending in their money. Thus, especially with occult items purchased through the mail, I give you this ancient warning, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. And from this warning, I jump to ancient grimoires. So far in this course, I have hardly touched the subject of ancient textbooks of magic known as grimoires. Some of the famous ones which are still available include the Greater Key of Solomon, a part of the Lesser Key of Solomon, Grimoire of Armadale, the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelli the Mage, and the Secret Grimoire of Turiel. Some books, such as The Secret Lore of Magic by Idris Shah and the Book of Ceremonial Magic by A.E. White, and nothing but compilations of other grimoires such as the ones mentioned above. If these books are so powerful, why wouldn't it have been easier for me to just say go buy them and follow the instructions carefully? Unfortunately, it is not that easy. That is why so many of the above named volumes are printed and purchased, but so little real magic is done. But there is a key to unlocking their secrets and learning how to be successful using them. This key is found in the idea behind the word which describes these texts, grimoires. It is a French word meaning grammar book. It was expected that a student of magic would have a teacher to instruct him or her in the subtleties of the various planes of existence and how to alter them through the knowledge and the use of the universal laws. Grimoires were not meant to give out every bit of magical knowledge. They were designed to aid a student's memory. They are, in a sense, nothing more than notes. Once this is understood, instead of looking at what is included in these books, notice what is omitted. In the grimoires, the knowledge of karma and the need to do a divination before doing any great magic is never discussed. The teacher would have instilled these ideas very strongly into the head of a student. But more importantly, omitted from the grimoires are what I call the three necessities of great magic. The first one of these is the necessity of a positive attitude. If you don't think that your magic will work, it won't. This should not imply, however, that the magic is nothing more than a mental technique. There are many cases for techniques of standard allopathic Western medicine being overpowered by a negative mental attitude. This is not because the medicine treatment was nothing more than a placebo. Rather, it is because the mind and body are ultimately intimately connected, and one cannot be cured if the other is not cured. Similarly, if the mind is not positive toward the magic you are doing, it can defeat your practical techniques. It is impossible to be successful as a magician if you are not positive that your magic will work. The second necessity is the necessity of knowing how to generate and control magical energy. This is just what you have been learning to do in the rituals given so far in this course. Finally, the third necessity is knowledge. This is the knowledge of what to do with the energy once that energy has been raised and can be controlled. The ancient magical student will learn that he or she must have a positive attitude and will also do hours of exercise to learn how to generate and control energy, just as you have been doing. But memorizing large quantities of knowledge as to what to do with that energy would be difficult for anyone. This is true even for those who lived in periods where techniques of memory were far more in practice than today. Thus, this knowledge aspect of magic was written down to aid the student and help the student avoid possible dangerous mistakes. It is these workbooks, which are known as grimoires. We will deal with some of the methods of these texts in later lessons in this course. Preview. The following questions are designed to help you determine if you have mastered the information in Lesson 4. Please try to answer them without looking at the text. The answers are in Appendix 2. 1. What are the qualities of element air? 2. What was an early Christian symbol? 3. What are the differences between a true mystical swastika and the perverted Nazi swastika? 4. Who is the archangel of air? 5. Why is it difficult to remember past lives? 6. The LBRP is a support or basis for what? 7. What does the BRH clear from your area? 8. What is the order for doing your at-home rituals? 9. Name 3 things you need to do to succeed at ritual magic. 10. What are the 3 necessities of gray magic? The following questions only you can answer. 1. Are you regularly performing all of your rituals? 2. Are you in control of elemental air? 3. Have you made your air dagger? 4. Do you understand the differences between the Eastern and Western systems of magic described in these lessons? 5. Have you chosen a motto?